Hello, my name is Delaney Darland, and I'm here to tell you why you should consider adding variable resistance training to your workout regimen. In this presentation, I will address what variable resistance training is, why it would be beneficial to your workouts, work to inform you of certain limitations and potential downsides of this type of exercise. Then I'll provide you with my own sample training program to give you an idea of what one might look like. Resistance training, but make it variable. Variable resistance training aims to alter the resistance and perform exercise while maximizing the force in a full range of motion. This is done so by the use of equipment like chains, bands, cams, and lever systems. This type of training is most often done by powerlifters. Types of variable resistance training, or as I call it, VRT. Through my research, I have found 3 types of VRT methods which have been studied and performed. These 3 types include the use of bands, chains, cams, and levers. Bands, other known as resistance bands, have become increasingly popular over the last few years. The bands provide varying resistance through an exercise across all planes of the body, i.e. the sagittal, frontal, transverse, and oblique planes. The bands can be worn directly on the body or placed onto the weights. Bands have also gained much recognition with respect to rehabilitation. Bands are used for rehabilitation of individuals because of their low impact and controllable properties. The bands are also very inexpensive and portable. Chains are the second type of VRT. Chains are also becoming a more widely used piece of equipment to supplement the exercises. Chains most often are used by powerlifters, but are now being used in more routine strength and conditioning programs. They work mostly in the vertical planes, i.e. the frontal and sagittal planes, and apply a gravitational force. They can be placed onto weights in a couple of different ways, including letting them dangle in the air until they reach the lowest point of the exercise, where they would then touch the ground, or letting them touch the ground throughout the entirety of the exercise. The textbook states the resistance provided by the chains is determined by the structure, density, length, diameter, and number of links. Cam and lever systems are another type of VRT, but not as popular. Cam and lever systems work to mimic the resistance of the musculature system. They are best suited for beginners because it involves a fixed path that is controlled and requires minimal skill. How will this improve performance? In the textbook, it says that VRT addresses joint leverage in weighted movements. It also addresses the mechanical disadvantages that regular resistance training programs possess and the compensatory acceleration throughout an exercise. VRT provides a wide range of resistance throughout a full range of motion. It does so by adding more resistance at the point of the movement where the strength is greatest and decreasing the resistance at the point of the movement where the strength is lowest. This switch in resistance helps increase neuromuscular activation, peak power, force production, and also helps initiate a faster stretch shortening cycle. Improving these factors will help an individual gain power, strength, as well as velocity. Another way VRT might improve performance is through rehabilitation. As I previously mentioned, resistance bands are often used in rehab to allow for a slow, controlled movement, which aims to help rebuild muscle in damaged ones. What does the science say about it? Well, after conducting my own research, not only do I believe VRT to be an effective form of training, but so does the data behind it. In an article I read, they addressed how VRT matches the strength curves of humans, which simplified means resistance becomes harder at the point of greatest strength and lessens at the strength as the strength goes down. In the article, Muscular Bases and Mechanisms of Variable Resistance Training Efficacy, they support the strength curve theory in saying, VR accommodates these types of exercises by progressively increasing resistance during the entirety of the concentric phase. In doing so, the musculoskeletal system is overloaded in a manner consistent with its ability to perform concentric work. When the musculature curve is matched, muscles are more able to reap the benefits of the intended exercise. Another study done comparing the effects of traditional resistance training methods and VRT methods implemented on elite youth rugby players showed a larger improvement in velocity and power of a 1-rep max bench press for those individuals using a VRT program. In fact, most of the studies I read about showed an increase in power. A study from the textbook by Wallace and coworkers found a 13% increase in peak power of a back squat with supplementation of bands. Another research article I read called Forms of VRT, they saw that the time of applied force, initial acceleration, and the recruitment and activity of stabilizing and synergist muscles are increased via chain training. As with any research, there are limitations and negative factors. One thing that should be considered about performing these type of exercises is the risk of injury. They require proper form and correct use of equipment. Anytime someone begins a new training program technique with varying loads, there is an increased risk of injury that must be acknowledged. If this type of training is being used for rehabilitation, there is some possibility to further damage the muscles. Using such equipment also requires resistance loads to be calculated, which can prove to be difficult, as well as lead to an inaccuracy of calculated loads. If inaccurate loads are calculated, this can lead to injury or not achieving the desired results. These pieces of equipment are also not accommodating to the individual, but rather the individual must be accommodating to the equipment. As with any object, wear and tear is a potential factor. Equipment can malfunction or break, which presents a risk for injury. It is essential that any equipment used is inspected prior to use and following use. Overall, the biggest downside to VRT is the fact that there is not enough longitudinal data to fully grasp all of its effects on the body, though current research favors it. Here's an example training program I've put together. This program is for a 21-year-old female who is advanced in weight training. The equipment needed for this would be dumbbells and thin, long resistance bands. For her plan, she is to perform this workout plan for 3 days a week for 3 weeks, increasing dumbbell mass weekly. To sum all this information up, variable resistance training is the altering of resistance among a full range of motion by incorporating things like bands, chains, and cams and lever systems. This type of training works to improve power, strength, and velocity. It also addresses joint leverage, the mechanical disadvantages of regular RT, and compensatory acceleration. While there are some downsides, including muscle injuries, incorrect calculation of loads, not being accommodating to the performer, the wear and tear of equipment, and little data on the technique, it is still a very beneficial type of program. Thank you for listening to my presentation on variable resistance training, and I hope you will consider adding VRT to your workout regimen.